Hello, Jamie from Inky&Scrappy, sharing with you today a Slimline Mushroom Fairy Garden card using Hello Bluebird's Fairy Glade Slimline Horizonal die and Lawn Fawn's Fairy Friends stamp set. I've had this one for several years now, and can we say I'm afraid of it? I think it's gorgeous. I love it. That's why I bought it. And it got here, and I was scared of all of those pieces. After, in hindsight, now that I've put it together, really the only pieces that you really have to have in the right place are the two hills and the two front mushrooms. The rest you can kind of put wherever you would like because it doesn't affect your hillsides at all. And so knowing that now, it's not nearly as scary as it was when before I started it. I would definitely probably mix it up a little bit for some of those other pieces, but the scene in itself is gorgeous. So to start, I die cut this one out from 4 pieces, or four separate, ran it through 4 times at least. I think I ended up running it through a couple more times before I was finished because I decided I needed more layers. I decided this one needed to have lots of layers in depth and dimension, and I didn't want to do foam tape. I just went with cardstock layers. So I cut it out. I think I did 1 or 2 from heavy stock, mixed media heavy stock, and then the under layers that weren't going to get any ink on them anyways, I ended up cutting from some Nina Classic Cross Silver White, 100-pound cardstock. I went extra heavy on all of my cardstock because I wanted it to be thick and heavy and add that extra, volume or layers to it without having to go with an abundant amount of layers. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. I also brought in some Brutus Monroe aqua pigments in, I want to say it was Blue Frost. So it's just a white with like a bluish tone or pigment to it. I might have done the red one. I think I did the red one because I did a sunset scene. So I did do my back panel has an actual full panel. I was not going to try and get a smooth blend on the little pieces that are in between all of the things. I at least had enough foresight for that, right? I will not tell you the Distress Oxide colors I used in the video. I will try to list them all below and tell you which ones I used on what things. I did come in, you will see, with the blue and the purple, which were, I want to say it was Villainous Potion and maybe Chip Sapphire. I can't for sure say on the blue because I'm pretty sure I just used whatever was left on my brush, but I'm thinking it was Chip Sapphire. I could be wrong on that one. For adding in some Lola or some shadow onto the green on my hills and then onto the mushroom caps as well and onto those blades of grass. I think we forget that we can shade with purples and blues and not always black. I don't know. It was one of those yeah, why don't I do more of that? Because it adds an extra depth and quality to it. So I kind of tried to keep my grasses the same color. I tried to add a pop of that lighter green on that little, I think it's a clover piece. I'm not necessarily positive on that one. I tried to do my back hill darker than my front hill to kind of give me some of that depth and dimension just in my color, perception. I don't know. That was what I was going for. So I did bring in 1 purple mushroom, purple blue mushroom. I just thought it was a pretty color combo. I will end up coming in. At this point, I was just planning on doing the die. I wasn't planning on doing anything else with it. Of course, as I get further along, I change my mind because that's how I roll. I also would have maybe done a shaker on this one if I'd have thought it through a little bit more. Before I added that top pane on, because I used the frame as, an actual frame. And I think if I would have thought ahead, I would have put I would have waited on the last frame on top and put a clear acetate piece in there and added some glitter in there as a shaker. But, next time I decide to slay this dragon, I'll maybe do that. we'll see. So for this one, I wanted to add in multiple layers, and to do that, I kind of was, in my head, I knew where I wanted which ones to be further up, further back, and I did lose some pieces. Even with all my stickies and all of my everything everywhere, yeah, I lost my mushroom stem. I have had no clue where it went. It's taken me a week to actually do the voiceover for this one, and I've been using my desk all week to work on things, and I just found it last night. Like both of the mushroom stems, or the 3 mushroom stems that went missing. I finally found them. Don't even ask. Like, I have no clue. It must have been the fairies that decided to hide them on me. That's what I'm going with. So for those little dots, I did add those in, and then of course, adding ink in layers that I was afraid that might show through once my top layer was on. I didn't do this for all of it. I just did it for the little mushroom speckles because I was kind of afraid that those were going to get, if it was shifting a little bit, you might get a white shadow, and I didn't want that stark white contrast there, so that's why I added in the extra. So making sure I add in extra layers where I want. So my one mushroom that's in the back hill is going to be further up, but it's not going to be as tall as that mushroom that's in the first layer. And so that was kind of how I went and designed it from there. It was what it was. I did go in with the black ink, not alcohol, the black marker for my alcohol ink markers, and colored in the actual frame for it instead of doing a distress oxide ink or ink blending it. I just felt it was faster to do the markering on that one. I would love to slay this one with alcohol markers and do the ink blending on it. I just didn't know if I was ready to tackle it the first time through. Now that I put it together once, maybe next time I will do it that way, but I don't know. We'll see. This one was definitely fun to just ink blend on and kind of, I didn't have to think about it. I think that was the big thing. I just wasn't in a creative mood, and so sometimes doing something that's like a puzzle that you just, put together works. And by the time I got this far, I was definitely, in my element here. So enjoying it. So I did go around with that black alcohol marker around the outside to kind of cover up the white. I maybe should have done this before I glued it all down. Of course, I had already glued on that top black frame, and I didn't want to cut it out again. So I did not make it a shaker, but this was the point where I was like, oh, it would have been really cute as a shaker. But that's fine. I did come back in with my little aqua pigments here and splattered it again because, fairy dust needs to be everywhere, not just on the background. So then, of course, I decided it needed some fairies. It just, it was cute. I could have definitely just gone with the sentiment here, and it would have been adorably, fine. But I decided, it looked like it needed a couple of fairies and a little fairy flower house and a little pathway. So I ended up doing that. And then, of course, I'm also bringing in the sentiment from that Fairy Friends stamp set. So it says, have a magical day. And then I will stamp this using my stamp platform. I have been playing with my stamp platform more lately just because my Misty has other things in it, but this one I like because it's open-ended and I have a little bit more wiggle room with it. Size-wise, I don't know. They all have their purposes, I think. So I did remember to do some anti-static powder on it. My background was dry at this point already, but just to make sure that it wasn't going to stick. And here was my thought. If the embossing powder was going to stick everywhere in the background, I was just going to let the ink dry and I was just going to dust it off and call it a day. Because, sometimes it just doesn't work the way we want it to work. But it didn't stick, thankfully, and I was able to add that holographic embossing powder on top. It really just gives it a glittery look. It's not really, I don't want to say it's really a clear emboss because it's not shiny, it's glittery. and rough. I don't know. I did bring in some ink on 3. Is this no line color? Oh, fade out ink. Sorry, that's what it is. It's fade out ink. So I decided to go with some no line coloring. If I could go back, I would probably bring out my zigs for this one, just because, or my Ohuhu Honolulu line, which is the brush markers, because I think you can get a finer point, or, you know, at least when you're doing that no line coloring, it needs to be a little bit more, I don't know, a sharper point to it. And that's where my bullet nibs probably didn't help me a whole lot. So I'm just pulling in colors from my color charts that are my swatch sheets that match my inky background colors. I wanted it to blend, to coordinate with it, and that was why I went with the no line coloring. I didn't want the stark white contrast, and so that was how I ended up doing it. If I didn't like the color, I thought it was too light, I brought in a darker one and went that route. I did not write down my colors. I did grab a screenshot for you, so if you're interested in the colors that I used, it will be coming along here when I'm all done with the coloring. Now, keep in mind, this is sped up 7.12 times, and most of the video is sped up between, you know, anywhere between 3.9 and I think 8-ish for the ink blending and the building of the background. It, you know, it takes a long time to do some of these, and I think we forget when we watch YouTube videos that are in super sped up mode. Don't worry, I like watching the super sped up mode because I don't have time to sit there and watch someone create for hours on it. I wish I did, but I don't. So I did bring in some yellow grays for my grays on these, kind of keeping them fairly simple on the coloring. Now, I will say this. I am off camera. I know I made myself a playpen the other day, and it worked really well. I need to remember to do that when I zoom in when coloring. Just drawing lines on my grid mat to make sure I'm in frame. Yeah, we're going to call it Jamie's playpen. I need one of them. So I am coming in with some darker browns for my one fairy, and then, of course, for my other fairy, I'm going to... the camera ended up... My camera stopped recording at like 29 minutes. And so it had stopped recording. I didn't catch it right away. So since I caught it and I started it back up, I'd laid in where I wanted my darker tones. And so you're going to see this. I had actually grabbed the lighter of the 2 yellows, and I didn't know it. So I had to come back in with the darker and kind of go back over it again. This is the speed that I no line color in. Yeah, this is the 7.12 times. Yeah, goes a lot faster that way, doesn't it? I prefer watching it at that as opposed to the real time. I'm just coming in with a super fine, I think it's 0.005 fine liner for adding in the face details. Now, I did not color in the wings. I decided to do them in a Lawn Fawn's, is it like a shimmer? I don't know. It's a pastel glimmer paper or shimmer paper. Pearlescent vellum. There we go. That's the word. So I did stamp it on there, and then I did hand cut everything out because I did not want a white line, and I was pretty sure that my brother's scan and cut was not going to be nice to me on those no line colored images, so I just fussy cut. It's not my strong suit. I haven't done it in a long time. I did forget to add in the yellow window, or like the light coming out of the window. I did it after I was all done with pictures, like the next day. I'm looking at it, I'm like, I totally forgot I had grabbed the yellow when I did the hair, and I'm like, oh, I need to color in the window of the house. Yeah, I totally spaced it. So I did not glue my little fairy wings down. That way they can kind of, you know, ruffle in the breeze, I guess you can say. But this one has a lot of dimension and a lot of layers. It's definitely heavy. I enjoyed this one, and I'm sure I would bring in that mushroom background again. It was good. Have an amazing day. Bye!